Walid was born and raised in Dubai in the family of a wealthy oil industrialist, and thus the man was surrounded by luxury and wealth from an early age. He was a very attractive man whose main virtues were honesty and nobility. The man was taught by the best of teachers from Europe and the United States. When Walid came of age, he decided to go to the United States to study finance at one of the most prestigious universities in the country. Much to Walid's disappointment, his parents made arrangements to marry their son with a girl from a wealthy family, as is customary in their country. This happened when Walid was 5 years old and had a very vague idea what marriage and family were. Therefore, when the man decided to leave the country and go study in the USA, his father reminded him of his obligations. "Son, you need to get married as soon as possible. Trust my experience. Fatima will make a wonderful wife and mother for your children." But Walid didn't love her, so he replied, "Father, I respect the culture of our country and honor the traditions of my ancestors, but I don't believe in marriage without love." Since the man spent a lot of time in Europe and the United States, his views on arranged marriage were categorical. However, after long arguments and admonitions, the parents managed to convince their son that he needed to fulfill his duty. Sighing sadly, Walid agreed to honor the family tradition and promised to fulfill his obligations on the condition that he would first graduate from the university, and only then would he tie the knot. Frankly, Fatima wasn't all that excited and didn't have any illusions about the upcoming wedding and a happy family life either. The young people were simply too different. The young woman realized that she had no common interests or goals with Walid. But on the other hand, Walid and Fatima knew that if they were to break their promise, they would certainly and deeply upset their relatives. Despite all of this, a strong friendship developed between the young people, which survived the distance and time difference. They emailed each other and talked on the phone a lot. When Walid was starting his senior year at the university, he told the bride-to-be when it was time to start planning their wedding. "Oh sure, I'll get everything ready," answered Fatima, although deep down she was having serious doubts about the upcoming marriage. Hearing her response, Walid was taken aback for a moment. As if it were up to him, he would gladly give up on this venture. However, the opinion of his parents and the custom of his native country were a very strong motivator, and therefore the man accepted the idea of the impending wedding. It's hard to say how this venture would have eventually ended if fate, which seemed to have other plans for this couple, hadn't intervened in the plans of the young people. One day, shortly before Walid was supposed to graduate, Fatima called her groom and said that she dreamed of a trip to the United States more than anything else. The thing was that Fatima only ever saw the country in pictures and would have liked to visit it all, from Louisiana to Minnesota or Washington. Walid smiled knowingly and agreed to comply with her request. This was partially due to the fact that the young people were planning to move to the United States after the wedding and build their life there. Therefore, Walid took Fatima's suggestion seriously and volunteered to organize a tour for her so she could visit the most significant places in the country. The bride decided to take this trip with her aunt because it was more fun traveling together and the flight wouldn't seem so long. Unfortunately, they never made it to their destination. It was raining that morning, and on their way to the airport, the travelers got into a terrible car accident. The road turned out to be wet, and the driver lost control of the car and swirled into oncoming traffic, where it collided with a heavy-duty trailer. Fatima died of her injuries before the ambulance arrived. It's hard to describe how the grief-stricken Walid was. In one instant, he lost his bride and his best friend. Even though the couple didn't feel true love for each other, they did feel some affection and have developed a strong friendship. Fatima's death came as a very heavy blow for Walid, pushing him into deep depression. This tragic event shocked the young man so much that he told his parents that he wasn't going to return to his homeland, but was going to stay and work in the United States instead. Time went by, and when Walid was 35 years old, his father fell seriously ill. Feeling that he was getting weaker every day, the young man asked his son to come home and take over leadership of his oil empire. Of course, Walid couldn't say no to his father's request and gladly volunteered to help because he was the only son and heir to the family business. When the man returned to his homeland, the only person meeting him at the airport was his mother, haggard from sleepless nights and constantly worrying about her husband's health. Unfortunately, the ruthless fate didn't leave Walid's father much time to enjoy his son's company. To the great sorrow of his family and friends, the elderly man died 6 months after Walid's return to his homeland. Thus, at the age of 35, Walid inherited the multi-million-dollar empire, which he began to lead as its rightful owner. One day, as Walid was in a hurry to get to a meeting with his partners, he ran into a pretty woman on the street. The stranger was carrying a folder with some documents, which she accidentally dropped when Walid ran into her. Blushing with embarrassment, the man rushed to help her pick up the papers, apologizing for his clumsiness. But the girl was very understanding and easily forgave the man. As it turned out, the woman's name was Jalila, and she worked as a hotel administrator. During these few short minutes of their first encounter, Walid was literally enchanted by the beauty of this woman, who, despite her incredible looks, behaved very modestly. The next day, Walid came to the hotel where Jalila worked and asked her out to dinner. To the man's great surprise, upon learning that he was a rich oil industrialist, the modest beauty rejected his invite. However, this was when Walid's education at one of the best universities in the world came in handy. He used his knowledge to convince the woman that different classes and social status were complete nonsense, invented by arrogant people with overly high esteem. After much persuasion, Jalila finally agreed to go out with Walid. Needless to say, this dinner became the starting point in their rapidly developing relationship. It was after this dinner that Walid and Jalila started seeing each other almost every day. Despite the fact that the young people came from different social circles, they were good together. Ashamed of her poverty, Jalila rarely talked about her family, and Walid, understanding how she must have been feeling, didn't ask any questions. He only knew that her parents had passed away, and Jalila kept quiet about the rest of her relatives. The relationship between the young people developed so quickly, and it was so romantic, that a year later, despite the disapproval of Walid's mother, they got married. Friends of the groom's family often talked about them behind their backs. The poor girl was very fortunate. She pulled out a lucky ticket in life. But Walid is 16 years older than her. What kind of love is that? It's just greed. But the loving husband didn't pay any attention to all the rumors and snotty remarks, because he loved Jalila very much and couldn't imagine life without her. The mother kept telling the man, "Walid, she is from a poor family, and she only wants your money." But the young millionaire just brushed her off and believed his wife's every word. But when his personal driver also voiced his concerns regarding this matter, Walid got seriously alarmed. The thing was that Jalila asked the driver to take her to the same place outside the city every day. Moreover, the driver had no idea who the girl was visiting, since he never left the car. However, he couldn't exclude the possibility that there was another man. Walid frowned as jealousy sparked up in his soul. The millionaire came up with a solution almost immediately, and he got to implementing his plan right away. Walid put on the same clothes that the driver was wearing. He also put on a wig and some makeup to make him look like the driver. The next day, when Jalila asked to be taken to the same place again, it wasn't the chauffeur who was driving the car, but her millionaire husband wearing makeup. As the driver said, the destination was outside the city. Having asked the driver to wait, Jalila went inside the nondescript house that looked very suspicious. Walid sat in the car for about half an hour and then got out and pulled the door handle, decisively coming inside the unknown house. Needless to say, what the man saw there turned his life upside down. Tears came flowing down Walid's face, involuntarily washing off the makeup. When he came in, Walid saw Jalila spoon-feeding a decrepit old man lying on the bed, whose hands were twisted with age and arthritis. Unable to keep up the ruse, Walid took off his wig and wiped the rest of the makeup off his face. Jalila looked at her husband in surprise and then understood everything without words. The woman came up to Walid, hugged her husband and kissed him tenderly, whispering in his ear what a fool he was. As it turned out, the sick old man was Jalila's grandfather. She was simply embarrassed to let her rich husband meet her poor relative, and the old man was also against becoming a burden for the young granddaughter. All he wanted for her was happiness and a good family. The story Jalila told her husband touched him so much that he insisted on taking the grandfather home with them right away. The man was relieved that all his suspicions turned out to be unfounded and was on cloud 9 with happiness. But as it turned out later, this was far from all the good news he would get that day. Hugging Walid, Jalila was happy to tell that she was carrying their child. "Thank you, dear. I couldn't even dream of a better girl," said Walid, and taking his beloved wife in his arms, he twirled her around the room, while her grandfather commented with approval. The man was incredibly happy that despite the distrust of his relatives, he made the right choice and found a faithful and loving spouse.